Going to stay with me. So Peter Cook joining me now, and Peter and myself, a top Republican congressman who says he is seriously concerned about the agreement. We bring in Representative Ed Royce of California. He's chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, good morning. I know that you have said, and I'm going to quote you here, the agreement does not meet the standards necessary to protect the U.S. and its allies. What is the most dangerous component to you?
I think the most dangerous component is that we've had 6 Security Council resolutions that say that those centrifuges should stop spinning, and they're not going to stop spinning. The Iranian regime is being guaranteed the right to enrich not only during the 6-month deal, but if you read the framework, it says going forward. And this is not where Congress is. Congress believes, as does the National Security Council at the UN, that they need to stop their enrichment program.
So, Congressman, what would it take then? What kind of agreement, what kind of language would you need to see to get on board?
Well, to get on board, what we wanted to see was the sanctions, the full force of sanctions brought against Iran, and the Ayatollah make a decision between continuing with his nuclear weapons program or discontinuing it. And he has not done that. He's already got a ICBM program where they have the most advanced missiles in the region. And now on top of that, you're going to add this ability for breakout in the future by allowing them to keep their centrifuges spinning. And so that's the key. I would ratchet up the sanctions. We have a bill to do that. My legislation passed the House 400 to 20. It's in the Senate. And I'll remind you of one other thing. The original sanctions on oil, that was supported 100 to 0 in the Senate, but the president opposed it. The president opposed the very sanctions that brought Iran to the table. So we're saying don't negotiate a bad deal. Negotiate the deal that the UN Security Council asked for in their nuclear program. That's what we want.
Are you? Yes. Do you believe at this point that you in the House and Senator Schumer, others in the Senate, can actually block this temporary agreement from being put in place at this point? Or are your sanctions going to be conditional on this 6-month time period? Are you going to give the president this 6 months?
Remember, the only reason we're here is because we overrode the president before. And he has been anxious. He has been opposed to the sanctions from the beginning, to the oil sanctions, and now he's opposed to the additional sanctions. We would use this as leverage to get the deal we need to get over the next 6 months. But seriously, if we walk away from this deal allowing Iran and the Ayatollah to develop a bomb, this is the very regime that had agitators in the streets, and you remember it, not too many weeks ago, shouting, "Death to America, death to America." This is not a regime that we want to allow to have a nuclear weapon. That's where the administration is headed. And it's not just Israel. I heard on your show the complaint. It is also Saudi Arabia. It is every one of our allies in the Middle East that has concerns about this. And to be frank, the UN Security Council represents international opinion when they say those centrifuges should stop spinning.
Mr. Chairman, if you don't let the president move forward with this deal, this temporary deal, just to test the Iranian resolve, to see whether or not they honor these commitments, don't you leave the only alternative out there as another step closer to a military confrontation?
Now listen, we heard that from the president when we wanted the oil sanctions in place. Reality is that the president's going to move forward with the negotiations. What we want is to stiffen his resolve to get the result that's actually going to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. You and I know that that's the real danger. The real danger is we let the Ayatollah end up with the capacity for undetectable nuclear breakout to get that weapon. And the way to prevent it is to get an agreement in which they don't continue to enrich. I mean, that's pretty clear.
Congressman, some people have said that Iran's new president, Rouhani, is a lot more open, let's say, to the West and towards working to the West than the regime of the past. Is there any point there?
Well, here's the point. You had a number of reformers who filed to run. None of them were allowed to run. Rouhani was allowed, along with 5 other candidates. Those 6 were handpicked by the Ayatollah to run. The reason Rouhani was on the list was because he was the chief negotiator who duped the Europeans over a period of 10 years. As Rouhani said, when I started negotiating, I had 8 centrifuges spinning. When I ended, I had 16,000 spinning. We built the equipment while we used soothing, calming words with the Europeans. We don't want him to replicate that with us in the negotiations. So yes, we're gonna try to work a deal with Rouhani, but let's be clear about what he did in the past. This is the fellow who did the crackdown in 1999 on the students in Iran, who called for that crackdown, called for them to be beaten mercilessly, in his words. This is a very tough guy we're dealing with here, a very clever fellow. Yes.
Chairman Royce, what do you think Israel does in the meantime? What do you think Benjamin Netanyahu, what is the next move by the Israelis? Do you think it's possible that they could move on their own?
I haven't heard from the Israelis on this. I have heard from our other allies in the region, in the Arab states, and they are all concerned about this deal. They all feel that we have not understood that the Iranian intention is to get its hands on a nuclear weapon if it can get that undetectable nuclear breakout. They all feel that we should negotiate to end the centrifuge program from spinning and to have the centrifuges dismantled. And I think that's the logical conclusion of anybody looking at this objectively.
So, Congressman, basically, if Iran says we will end our weapons-making capability, then that changes your perspective 100%.
Absolutely. Lift the sanctions. That's the deal we're looking for. That's the deal the UN Security Council wanted, and that's the deal I think that members of Congress would like to see.
And what about from our side, Congressman? I mean, in theory, compromise takes 2 sides.
Right, and that's why we should be ready to lift the oil sanctions and lift all the sanctions on Iran and engage them in every way if we get their concurrence that they will end their centrifuges from spinning and discontinue their nuclear program.
Congressman, thank you. Oh, Peter, go ahead.
Thank you very much.
Congressman Ed Royce there joining us, California, of course. Peter Cook with us there from D.C.